G'day, I'm Warwick Schiller and welcome back to the Principles of Training. Today the principle I want to talk about I call the Donkey Kong principle. So I call this principle the Donkey Kong principle based on the video game of Donkey Kong, and every video game is basically set up to teach you how to learn. Okay, and I use Donkey Kong as an example because it's kind of my era, and a lot of people that I teach are middle-aged like me, so we all get Donkey Kong. We don't get Call of Battle 3 or something or other. But in Donkey Kong, if you think about it, you're an ape of some sort, okay? And the beginning you get fired out of a barrel. That's the start of the whole thing when you first play the game. And you start down this pathway. You press the controller and you head down this pathway, and there's an alligator coming towards you. And you get to that alligator and you go, oh, I'm not sure what to do, and you press a button, and it's a button that makes you squat down, the alligator kills you. What happens right then? You go back, the game stops, you go back to the start and you come out again, and you keep going up to that first obstacle, which is the one alligator, till you figure out which button to press, which gets you to jump. And if you jump at the wrong time and the alligator kills you, you go back in the barrel again and you start all over again until you can jump that first alligator, okay? That is the most basic move in Donkey Kong, is jumping, and jumping one thing at a time. And so once you can jump that first alligator, I think then you're going along and there's two alligators coming towards you and you have to jump. I can't remember if you have to jump both of them or over one and the other. I think it's both of them at the same time. And initially when you try to jump over both of them, you jump too early and you land on the second alligator, and what happens? You die, and you go back and you get to practice jumping one alligator again. You get to practice that one jump again. And then when you finally get to where you can jump those two alligators, you've probably practiced that first one a lot more than you've practiced the second one. Then you go along a little further and you get to the next obstacle. And with that next obstacle, it's a little more tricky too. And if you die there, you don't get to keep going. You go back to the very beginning. You come back out and you've got to practice your first jump and your second jump. And the whole Donkey Kong principle is all about every time something goes wrong, or every time you add something new, you make sure that you know everything leading up to that point. And that's what video games do. The way they're set up is they really teach you how to practice the basics. So the Donkey Kong principle is basically how everybody's taught how to learn. And just like with the Donkey Kong thing, with the video game, you've got to learn the first thing before you're allowed to go to the second thing. And then when you get that wrong, you have to prove that you still know the first thing before you're allowed to go to the second thing. Once you get the second thing right, you get to the third thing. If you mess it up, you have to go back and practice the first and the second thing. Now, I do a lot of clinics around the world, and I have 12 people in my clinic, 6 in the morning group, 6 in the afternoon group. And I always ask people, so I'd like you to tell me your name and tell me what problem you'd like to solve with your horse. And I found that I would get to the third person when I'm learning their names in the morning, or meeting the people in the morning. I'd get to the third person and I couldn't remember the first person's name. And I'd get to the sixth person and I couldn't remember everybody else's names. And so I would call people, hey you, for the next couple of days. And so I thought, I need to fix that. How would I go about teaching a horse something as complex as 6 particular things? And so I changed how I do the start of my clinics. So here's some footage from a recent clinic in Arizona, and I'll show you how I do that at the start of the clinic so I remember everybody's names. You guys with? Okay, so I need to know your name, where you're up to with your horse. So you are?
My name's Kelvin Baldwin.
Kelvin, hey, how are you?
Good.
Good. And what's this one's story? Okay, cool. And you're Kelvin?
Yes, sir.
Okay, hello.
Hello.
You are?
Kathy.
Kathy.
And this is Rocco.
Okay, good. So he's a bit of an enigma, a bit of a puzzle. Okay, and you're Kathy. Okay, so we've got Kelvin. Kelvin's supposed to be standing right here, but he's not. But we've got Kelvin, Kathy.
And I'm Beverly. I'm go by Bev.
Bev?
Yes.
How are you?
Good.
Good. so what's your horse's story?
He's
Okay, well it's good you recognise that. Okay, and you're Bev. Okay, so we've got Kelvin, Kathy, Bev, Craig, how are you? Good, so what's this one's story?
This is Dolly's.
That's probably a good problem to want to have to solve here. So, you're Craig. Okay, so we've got Kelvin, Kathy, Bev, Craig, and Laurie, how are you? Has your horse rolled yet? So, you're Laurie? Okay, so we've got Kelvin, Kathy, Bev, Craig, Laurie, and Mickey, how are you?
With the speakers.
Okay,
Yeah,
perfect.
He'll calm down pretty easily.
Okay, awesome. And you're Mickey?
Yeah.
Okay, so here we go. We have Kelvin, Kathy, Bev, Craig, Laurie, and Mickey. You want to hear it again? Because I'm really good at this. Kelvin, Kathy, Bev, Craig, Laurie, Mickey. Now, everybody gives me a clap because I'm really clever. That's only to see what horses run around on the end of the lead when you guys clap. So there is one of the first principles of training you need to know, which I call the Donkey Kong principle. That's one of the episodes I'm doing. And let's go down here and ask Kelvin a question. So Kelvin, do you remember when I was talking to you, the last thing I said to you?
No, I got hit in the head by a bomb, so I have terrible memory.
Okay, we probably put you in the wrong spot today, but what I said to you before I went down there was, and you're Kelvin.
Yes, sir.
I made sure I knew this thing before I add any more information, okay? So this will be easy for you, Kathy. What was the last thing I said to you?
I think you repeated that I want the horse to have more confidence.
No, I said, and you're Kathy. Okay, I made sure I knew that before I added any more information. So when I said, and you're Kathy, what did I do then?
You went to the next person.
No, I didn't. I said, and you're Kathy. Okay, so we've got Kelvin, Kathy, and hello, young lady, what's your name? And you said, oh, I'm Bev. Now this will be easy for you. What was the last thing I said to you?
You said, you're Bev.
And then what did I do? No, I didn't go backwards.
Oh.
I didn't go Bev, Kathy, Kelvin. I said, and you're Bev. And then what did I do?
Then you went to Calvin.
Then I said, okay, we've got Kelvin, Kathy, Bev. Okay, that's one piece of information. Now all I have to do to get the fourth thing is add one more piece of information. I'm not adding 4 pieces of information together. Start out with Kelvin and that's a piece of information, and then I add Kelvin and Kathy. Now that becomes a piece of information that I know. Kelvin, Kathy. All I have to do is add one more. And so think about that whole thing. How many times did I practice Kelvin's name? 5 or 6, okay? How many times did I practice Mickey's name, or learn Mickey's name? Once. Mickey is the flying lead change. Mickey is the holy grail. Mickey's the hard thing. It's easy by the time you get there, but there's a whole lot of work goes into all the basic stuff to get there. Does that make sense? And the reason I call it the Donkey Kong principle, if any of you guys have ever played a video game, and Donkey Kong's a video game that I played many years ago, is you start out, you're a monkey. So then after I do that, usually right then I go on to explain the whole Donkey Kong theory, but you saw when I was talking to those people that I said that Mickey is easy. Mickey is your holy grail. Mickey's your flying lead change. Mickey's whatever it is. Mickey's usually hard for people, but that hard thing is really quite easy by the time you get to it if you can start at the beginning and learn your Kelvins and your Kathys and your Bevs. So one of the best examples of this Donkey Kong principle happened at a clinic a couple of years ago in England, and there was a young girl there with a horse, and he was an eventer. He was an Irish sport horse. He was 10 years old, and he's been rather anxious all his life and likes to go forward. I mean, you've got to hang on to the reins to control him, to stop him from going fast at all. You know, I don't think he's ever been ridden on a loose rein, because if you turn loose, he would just run away. And he was even like that on the ground. You know, on the ground, I asked him to go, and when I asked him to stop, I actually couldn't get him to stop. I actually had to back up against a fence like this. So he was running around me, and I backed up against the fence and asked him to go, and the fence stopped him because I couldn't get him to stop. And then when I would ask him to go over this way, he'd go around and that fence would stop him. So that afternoon we got on to do the ridden work. Now I said before that I usually have 2 groups in my clinics, a morning group and an afternoon group. That actually paid to have 2 horses in the clinic, but one of them wouldn't get on the trailer to come to the clinic. So this horse got to be in both morning and afternoon group. And so in the afternoon she got on, and the first thing I wanted her to do, my Kelvin, so to speak, is to get this horse to where he could just respond to this rein pressure here and bend his head without him moving his feet. Okay, and when she first started to do that, she went to bend his head, and he wouldn't bend his head, he just pulled the reins out of her hand and wanted to walk around and around and around and around and pulling on her. Then he would bend his head, but he couldn't find the stop. He couldn't just stop and relax. He couldn't just stand there and do that, okay, on either side. And so basically all she spent the whole afternoon, the first afternoon, 4 hours basically, working on getting her horse to where this part here works. That's basically her Kelvin. We came back the second day and she started using the Donkey Kong principle. She started back at the beginning again. How's your Kelvin? And she got on, and it wasn't great, but it took about probably 15-20 minutes or so till we could get what we had the first day. Now it took us 4 hours the first day to get to where we could do this. And then the second day we came back, only took us about 20 minutes. Then we've got to add the next step, the Kathy, okay? And if you think back to the second principle of training is you know, when you get them up, get them back down again. Don't go to bed angry. And so that's the down bit. If this horse couldn't stand still here on his own on a loose rein, he's up. And so getting that part working was getting him down. Now we've got to get him responsive. And so what I had her work on then was, can you bend his head now? Can you? So she was carrying a dressage whip. Can you slide your leg back and have him respond to your leg? If you can't respond to your leg, tap him with the whip until he responds to it. Well, so she slid her leg back, put her leg on, nothing happened. So she tapped with the whip, nothing happened. Then she tapped with the whip and he finally untracked. And then she took her leg off, and I'm gonna make him do it. But then she spent the next 15 minutes walking around in circles because he couldn't stop again. Once he got up, he couldn't get back down. He went around and around, and finally, he came to a stop. So once he came to a stop, then we're good. Okay, so how's your Kelvin? Does your Kelvin work? Yes, I can bend his head and not him have him move his feet. Okay, so how's your Kathy, which is the next step? Can you get him up? She put her leg on, he wouldn't go. She'd have to tap with the whip, tap, tap, tap. Once she got him moving, she'd take her leg off and he couldn't come back down to a stop again. So she spent the second morning from the beginning of the clinic till lunchtime working on her Kathy. So basically that's the principle of, if you get them up, can you get them down? So once you get them responsive, when you take your leg off, you're no longer asking them to go, they should be able to find it back down again. Those are your two principles. Can you be relaxed and can you be responsive? That's your Kelvin and your Kathy in that case. Then we came back after lunch and we started asking him to walk around, and she would ask him to walk just on a loose rein, no steering, just what we're working on here is him controlling himself. This is the next step. Ask him to walk, and what he would do is he would pick up the trot and trot off, and she'd have to bend him around till he stopped. And she did that over and over and over until and so the thing about it, when she bent him back to the stop, he stopped and he relaxed. Really, they have to be able to come back to a relaxed state. Then after a while, he would be walking along and he'd pick up the trot and trot off, and she could bend him around, and when he hit the walk, you know, so he'd go for a trot, without her asking, when she bent him, when he hit the walk, right there he was relaxed and she could actually let go at the walk. So it was almost like she'd saved the first level in Donkey Kong and she's now working on the second level. She didn't have to go over the first level again. She could get that relaxation at the walk. So we did that, got the relaxation at the walk. Then we get to where we would ask her to trot, and that horse would want to pick up the canter. And so we'd bend that horse back to relaxed at the trot. Then she got to where when she had a relaxed trot, she would ask him to canter from the trot, and as soon as he hit the canter, she would bend him back to a trot, but not just a trot, a relaxed trot. And a lot of times when she would steer him back to that trot, and initially he was stiff, like he didn't want to bend, and it wasn't until he put a bend in his body that his head hung down, he relaxed, and we practiced that over and over. So once he could go into the canter and remain relaxed, which means when he hit the canter, it was very easy for her to bend him back to a trot, he wasn't stiff. Then we just let him canter around there for a while, and at one point in time I said, just drop the reins on his neck and put your hands on your head, which she did, and he just continued cruising around there. And I said to her mother, I said, so how old is he? And she said 10, and I said, has he ever had anybody do that? Has anybody ever been able to drop the reins on his neck and stick their hands on his head with him running away? And she said, most certainly not, never. So that's the first time we'd ever tried to put the reins on his neck and stick her hands on her head and not steer him, and he controlled himself. So that's like your Mickey in the Donkey Kong theory. Once he could canter around and she could bend him to a stop quite easily from a canter, which means he was relaxed at the canter, then I actually, with the reins completely loose, asked her to just use her seat to slow him down. Okay, so he's cantering around, she uses the seat, and when she sits, he goes canter, canter, trot, 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 walk, stop. And so once he did that, and we hadn't worked on that at all, that stuff's easy. Okay, once we did that, then just to make an example, I took the bridle off him. So he's never been ridden without a bridle on before, because he's always wanted to run away. And so she asked him to, I said, go ahead and ask him to walk. So she walked, he walked around. I said, go ahead and ask him to trot. He trots around. I said, go ahead and ask him to canter. He canters around, and when he canters, for the first time ever with no bridle on, bridleless, he goes ba-dum, 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 just canters around nice and smooth. And then when it looked like he was ready, I said to her, okay, Emily, just go ahead and sit, okay? And when she sat, he goes from a canter to a trot, to a walk, to a stop, stops and actually cocks his leg. Okay, so this is a very, very worried eventer who pulls like a train and is 10 years old. He's an Irish sport horse and runs all the time. And so the reason I think that's the best example of this is, like I said in the beginning when I met those people at the clinic, Mickey's easy. The last thing is easy. You don't have to work any on Mickey. And if you think about in this case right here, she spent 4 hours the first day working on getting a horse to stand still while he bent his head. Then she spent the next 4 hours the next morning working on, can he stand still while you bend his head? Then can he be responsive off your leg? And then when you take your leg off, can he come back down and be relaxed again? So that's that whole, you know, don't go to bed angry. When you get him up, can you get him back down? Once he had the ability to get up and down, the rest of it was easy. And like I said, the last thing she did was ride this horse around with no bridle on and slow him down off his seat the first time she'd ever tried, and it worked. One place you can use this Donkey Kong principle, and I use it a lot, is in the desensitizing of horses. And I think where people have trouble with desensitizing horses is they fail to do the Donkey Kong principle of when the horse gets it wrong, they fail to go back to the start. And so if I was going to desensitize a horse, say to this, if I wanted to work up to cracking this Australian stock whip here right down beside my horse, that wouldn't be the place I would start. I would have desensitized it with the lead rope and stuff. But then if I can take this thing and just flop it on the ground like that, so I'm directly in front of my horse. So if my horse is 12 o'clock, this is a big clock on the ground here, this is 3 o'clock. So is he good at 3 o'clock? Yes, he's good at 3 o'clock. Is he good at 2:45? Yes, he's good at 2:45. Is he good at 2:30? Yes, he's good at 2:30. Is he good at 2:15? Yes, he's good at 2:15. Is he good at 2? Yes, he's good at 2. Is he good at 2:45? Right there, see his head came up? He got a little bit bad right here. And this is 1:45 here. I'm going to wait till he blinks or gives me some indication that he's starting to relax again. Okay, I'm just going to stay here because he's right now, he's getting it wrong. He's not, there you go, he just blinked and lowered his head slightly, so I'm going to quit. Then where am I going to start again? We're going to go back to the beginning and go back to 3 o'clock. And so he made a mistake at 1:45. He's done this before, hasn't done it in a long time, but he's done it before. But I got to 1:45 and I had a problem. Sometimes that problem can be at 2:45 here. So I'm going to start out at 3. He's good with that. I'm going to go to 2:45. He's good with that. I'm going to go to 2:30. He's good with that. I'm watching his head, okay? His head and neck. I'm going to go to 2:15. He's good with that. 2 o'clock. He's good with that. 1:45. This is where he was bad last time, wasn't he? And he's good with that. Now I'm at 1:30. He's good with that. Now I'm at 1:25. He's good with that. Now I'm at 1. He's good with that. I'm at 12:45. And right then he just had a big sigh and told me he relaxed, so I might even quit right there. Not that I normally would always do that, but right then so I just got to the scary part and he sighed, so I got really close to him and he went, but he started to get a bit concerned back here at 1:45, I think it was, and I didn't keep going there. I waited till he got better and then I retreated back. It's like Donkey Kong. And so now I'm, what am I, 3 o'clock, 2:45, 2:30, 2:15, 2, 1:45, 1:30, 1:15, 1, 12:45, 12:30, 12:15, and there we are, okay? 12 o'clock would be cracking him on the bum. So he's good with that. So then what I could do is I could start out here with my cracking at, where am I at? 3 o'clock. How is it at 3 o'clock? He's good at 3, so I do 3, then I do 2:45. If he's good at 2:45, I'll do 2:30. If he's good at 2:30, I'll do 2:15. If he's good at 2:15, I'll go to 2. If he's good at 2, I'll go to 1:45. Now remember, this is where just think about that for a second. This is where he had trouble a minute ago. He got stuck right here, but not with the loud cracking, just with this whipping noise. And because when he got stuck right there, I waited till he got unstuck and then I went back to the start the second time around with the whip. So this is a bigger thing, like a Mickey. Okay, I started out with Kelvin. This is like a Mickey type thing. This is a big thing and it was quite easy for him. Okay, so where am I going to, I've just stopped. Where am I going to start again? I'm going to start over here at 3, 2:45, 2:30, 2:15, 2, 1:45, 1:30, 1:15, 1, 12:45, 12:30, 12:15, and he hasn't moved muscle. So you see think about that would be the hardest thing to do, crack it right there. Okay, but because I noticed doing something simpler like this, where it went wrong right here, I waited till it got good again and then I retreated and started all over again. That's what enabled me to crack that whip down there beside him. I think where most people go wrong is if you were doing this and your horse got slightly uptight right here, you go, oh, he's not too bad, I'll just keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going, and then it all falls to pieces. So the secret to that sort of thing is just do that Donkey Kong theory. When they get it wrong, okay, like his head went up and he got a little bit tight, as soon as he got it right and relaxed again, I stop and start again. If you think about when he got up tight and then he relaxed again, I stopped and started again, and that takes the pressure off him. What principle of training is that? That is the don't go to bed angry. We talked about that in the second episode. That was the second principle we talked about. Don't go to bed angry. If you get them up, get him back down again. And getting closer to him got him slightly up. Then when he got good with it, I took the pressure off, let him back down and started all over again. So I hope that gives you a bit of an idea of the principle of training that I call the Donkey Kong principle. Don't forget to join us next time and we'll talk about another principle of training.